pig! Let us in! It's the police!
The third little pig is now being taken into custody, so the spotlight is once again shone on the grey area of homeowners' rights to protect their properties.
This isn't right. The three little pigs are the victims.
Wolf threw down 2 houses. They got what he deserved.
But the pigs went too far.
You have every right to defend your property.
Pénétrer chez quelqu'un.
Kick the chinny chins up, fellas.
Boiling someone alive hardly constitutes reasonable
Somebody is
force.
going to break the law and intrude on
You
you.
can't protect yourself in your own home.
A man's home is his castle.
If someone tried to blow my house down, I'd do the same.
I knew the wolf. There's no way he could have blown down those houses. He had asthma.
The wolf had asthma. So what's the truth about the pigs' houses being blown down? Inside job.
There's no reason why those 2 houses, one made from straw, the other from wood, should have collapsed. Not even a healthy wolf's huff and puff could bring them down.
The 3 little pigs have confessed to conspiring to commit insurance fraud, framing the wolf in an attempt to cover their tracks. Their motive was financial, as they struggled to keep up with their mortgage repayments.
Guilty. I can empathise with the pigs.
I'm behind on my payments too.
How could this have happened?
I've lost everything.
Hello, my name is Agathe Guerrier. I'm a strategy director at BBH. I've worked here for 3 years and I work on Axe, which is called Links in the UK, The Guardian and Old El Paso. When we originally took the brief from our client, what they were asking for was something that was very much like a manifesto piece, so something quite epic and quite philosophical, explaining basically what the open philosophy was all about. And the reference that they kept coming back to, and that we kept coming back to actually as a team, was, you know, some of the Apple work from the 80s and 90s. So here's to the crazy ones, you know, stuff that feels very kind of belief-led and very again philosophical. So that's kind of what we went into creative development with. And quite quickly we realized that actually that kind of work was in quite sharp contradiction with what we were trying to do, because we were trying to convince people that The Guardian wasn't a pedantic brand, and yet we were using quite a pedantic way of delivering the reason why we weren't. So it basically didn't make sense. So quite quickly we actually realized that rather than a manifesto piece, what we needed was something that was much more rooted in product, much more tangible. What contributed to that as well, I think, is the realization that whilst open is quite a new idea in the world of news, it's not actually that new idea an idea in the world of the web. So the web in itself is open, and the way progressives access the world and access news is open in itself. So, you know, they're very much used to using Google, Twitter, TED, to sourcing their access to information from a variety of sources that they then themselves curate and compile and form their own opinion from. So whilst we thought open was great, and open is great, we just needed to show progressives what we meant by open, how open The Guardian actually was, so that they would understand what the benefit was for them. So quite quickly we left the kind of manifesto route, and we started looking at stuff that was basically product demos, that looked at how The Guardian would treat a news story in a way that was unique and compelling and revolutionary. So then we had a second phase of creative development where we tried to find examples. So we looked at lots of different stuff. We looked at, you know, Arab Spring. We looked at, you know, various news stories that were quite big at the time that we thought we could use as examples. But then we came up against another problem. And actually there were 2 problems. One was it felt like it would date quite quickly. So it felt like actually, you know, that would be in the news now. But even by the time we'd actually shot the ad and put it on air, which would be at least 8 weeks, that might already be kind of old hat. So that was the first issue. The second issue is that it felt very kind of inwards as a point of view. So it felt like it was very much about us and how we do things, but not so much about what you, the reader, get out of it. So that's when we started actually shifting the focus from open, the how, into the what, into the consumer benefit of open. So that's at that point that we revisited a line which is 25 years old, which is the whole picture. So we decided to go back to the whole picture as the key end line for The Guardian, and also the key benefit of what open journalism delivers, which is that by bringing all these points of view together, by curating the most comprehensive account of the world, we give you the richest possible understanding of what's going on. And then, so what we did then was try and find a story that wasn't a new story, so a story that wouldn't age, and a story that would enable us to show people what the benefit of open was. And quite quickly we got to fairy tale, I think, because a few reasons. Everyone knows fairy tales, so that was, a universal and timeless story that everyone would understand. But also, fairy tale are a very good example of a closed form of communications. There's only been one telling of the story ever. And actually, giving a new interpretation of the ending of a story tale as a way of demonstrating what the benefit of open is seemed to us like, really interesting strategically and creatively. So that's how we got to fairy tales, and that's how we got to Three Pigs, and to a piece of content that is basically telling you the story of what happens between the three pigs and the wolf like you've never heard it before. So allowing the world to contribute into the interpretation of what happened there, but also linking the story of a murder, so quite an individual story, with a bigger story about an economic crisis and what drives people to do things. So yeah. So when it came to campaign deployment, there was a few things we had to take into consideration. The first one was obviously we're a media brand, so we needed to make the most of our own channels to tell our own story. The second thing was our audience. So progressives are not defined by demographics, they're defined by a certain attitude to the world. So there are people who embrace change and who think that things can change for the better. So that was the second ingredient. And then the third ingredient was money, because The Guardian is quite a small brand. It's not Unilever or Procter & Gamble. So we had to be quite smart in the way we deployed the campaign in order to get maximum reach from quite a small media investment. So as a result, we had a campaign which was very focused on partnerships as a way of getting more out of our investment by really partnering up in clever ways with partners who we felt were close to us from the point of view of values and from the point of view of audiences as well. So we had two key partners. One was Channel 4 and the second one was Google. So Google enabled us to basically really propagate the campaign content on YouTube in a way that went way beyond what we could have afforded with mere media investment. So we did a homepage takeover on YouTube on the day that the campaign launched, and then we followed up with lots of pre-rolls. On Channel 4 we had a few select spots, again what we call Super Bowl spots. So they're not actually during the Super Bowl, but they're the equivalent in terms of big broadcast moments that really create fame for a creative idea, because you've got lots of people watching at the same time, you've got lots of second screen experience going on. So they were the two key partners. We also rolled out the campaign in cinemas through a partnership with Picture House, and then we did lots of video seeding to make sure that the video would be seen by as many people as possible. The campaign's performance was measured on two levels. There was quite a large proportion of the media that went against digital channels. On this we measured performance at a channel level, so we looked at things such as views of YouTube videos, click-throughs, shares, likes, so indicators of participation and engagement. And then at the campaign level overall, we looked at two key measures. One had to do with the primary campaign objective, which was to change perceptions of The Guardian. And there we used our brand tracker, which is basically a tool that enables us to understand how The Guardian is perceived. And because we've been running brand trackers for a while, we can do a before and after. So what we saw there is that on the item modern, we saw a jump 35% up from before the campaign period, and we also saw innovative and appeals to me grow by 26% post-campaign period. And then secondarily we also looked at traffic to guardian.co.uk, because we also wanted perception change to trigger behaviour change and people to start coming to the Guardian as their primary news destination. And the result of that was by September 2012, so 6 months after the launch of the campaign, the Guardian became the third biggest quality news brand online globally. So in terms of campaign integration, what we looked at was an approach that was very much based around creating a narrative arc rather than going matching luggage. So the campaign actually has quite a few different incarnations in terms of tone of voice, but also art direction. So there was the first phase, which was all about creating curiosity, so the kind of seeding phase, and it was actually quite short, probably about 10 days. And we used mostly our own channels and a little bit of guerrilla marketing as well. And that was all about getting people, curious and interested about the idea of the retelling of the Three Little Pigs story. Then the second phase was all about mass awareness. So it was trying to create as much impact as we could with limited media investment at the time of launch. So that's when we had the Super Bowl Channel 4 spots, the homepage YouTube takeover. So all that was about, maximum awareness for the campaign idea, for the idea of the whole picture and open journalism. And then the third phase of the campaign was more focused around driving participation and engagement with the idea of open journalism, with the idea of driving increased loyalty from progressives. And what we did here was lots of things in our own channels where we could actually invite participation and debate and ask people what they thought of the campaign, but also, from a more long-term point of view, how they would like to be involved with the editorial process and what was their appetite for being part of open journalism. And in that third phase we also used print quite a lot, because obviously the Three Little Pigs story is a timeless piece. But what we wanted as well was show how open journalism manifested itself through current news stories. So we used press to bring to life the idea of participation and openness through very tangible examples of stories that were in the news at that time. We threw away probably around 300 scripts on this brief, because I think, it's the Guardian, so everyone in the building wanted to work on it, and it was a really hard brief. So it was really hard getting to the right film. I think looking back on it, we did get to the right film, so I don't think we could have done anything better in film than Three Little Pigs was. I think our longing is for a campaign that would have had participation more baked in, really genuinely at the heart of it. So for example, filming different endings and letting Guardian readers actually decide on what they thought was the closest version to the truth. So things like that we would have loved to have done. I think what we're incredibly excited about is that this is the first chapter in our collaboration with The Guardian, and we're looking to create something that is a lot more engagement focused as the next chapter, so something hopefully that will be coming out later this year.